Today's topic, Ask Me Anything. Episode 3, that's right. We have become so cool now that we have made at least 3 episodes from your questions. So thank you. Today's topics include a good little mix. Some heavy hitters. We got one asking about asset protection and divorce. Yikes. We have some disability mix in there. We also have, what was the other one? Budgeting was a good one in there. And one about, this is a good one too. I love the questions that question financial advisors, but another one on the term fiduciary. And does that even mean anything today? 5 questions, couple topics all over. We got a few on disability, which pretty common. Again, our viewership, high income earners, especially physicians, that's our people. That's who we work with day in and day out on the professional side. On the YouTube side, we try to keep it a little bit more open to the high income group, which clearly includes our physicians, but also a few others. So without further ado, Ask Me Anything, episode 3. Here we go. All right, first one. How can you safeguard your assets in the case of a divorce? First and foremost, the person asking this question, I'm sorry. I know that those situations are not fun to deal with. I appreciate the question too. I also appreciate you being open to say this. And this is one where, outside of like, hey, we're going to open up bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. And I don't even know how that works. So I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. I think my best answer to this one is this is probably more of a pre-planning event than post-planning event. I don't know the whole situation here, but while the terms sometimes have some bad context to them, I do think depending on when you came into marriage, whether this is a prenup conversation, whether this is a post-nup conversation. While those words have a lot of negative thoughts that come with them, they can be very beneficial, and they also don't need to be as bad or as strict as they sound. I think the key here is being on the same page with your spouse. That's the main thing. And whether that's pre-marriage, so prenup, or even after marriage. Most people don't realize that you can also do a post-nup. You can put this agreement in place even after marriage. So keep that in mind. I don't have a legal way or a professional way to really safeguard assets. When you go through the divorce process, they're going to look at everything on both sides of it, even if it's just an account owned in your name. And that's how they go through the process. You'll start to see these things called quadros, where they're like, you got to move money from your 401k to this account. We get into alimony. There's a lot of moving parts there. But I think the easiest way for me to provide some guidance here is being on the same page with your spouse, whether this is through a prenup before the marriage or a post-nup after the marriage. I joke about this all the time. And while this may not save this question in particular, I always make the joke about asset protection. Quickest way to lose half your assets as a physician, you think it's always medical malpractice. It's not, it's divorce. Invest in your relationship. Date nights are vital. If you think the babysitter is expensive, wait till you see how expensive divorce can be. So pre-plan on that side. Again, keep the fire going. I think that's probably the best advice I can give here. Besides that prenup or post-nup, in this situation, it sounds like already married. Possibly if you get a post-nup in play before the divorce, that could help. Better conversation for an attorney. Those are just my thoughts as a financial advisor. Number 2, not as heavy on this one. I was denied disability coverage by one of the big 5 companies, but I was told I could appeal after 3 years. Is that process usually successful, or am I screwed? It's funny, when I first read that, I've actually always heard 5-year rule. Now, we don't sell insurance. We work with a very good insurance broker. We actually have a few different insurance brokers that we'll work with as well. It depends on the situation, what was noted on the underwriting. Sometimes it is a 5-year rule. So my best advice here would be, if you were denied, it probably means that that insurance broker did not do enough research before they even submitted that application. Whole nother conversation, but that bothers me on its own. If you've passed this 3-year point, I would find a good independent insurance broker. You know what? I'll name drop on this one. We use Larry Keller quite a bit, but also my other podcast, it's called Physician Sense. On that page, we have a resource page, and we have 3 providers on there. Larry's on that list, but 2 other fantastic ones as well with Michael and Stephanie. Again, physiciansense.com, and then we have that resource page on there. But those are 3 fantastic insurance brokers. They will work with underwriters before they ever submit an application to see if you're in a good spot or screwed, as you said, not me, not me. And that way you can decide how to go forward. You could have options there. They might just say they're going to put some type of exclusion on it. So there's a lot of moving parts there. Your key is the bridge has not been closed. Get a good broker on your side. Talk to them. Explain the situation. Let them go talk to underwriters before you ever submit an application to see what chance you got. and then go based on their guidance from there. That's your best route forward. Next question, what factors can lead to a person being denied from disability insurance? There's a lot of different things. I use myself as an example. I wasn't denied, but I did have an exclusion. I had a hockey injury from many, many years ago. I was literally in high school, cracked 2 vertebrae in my back. Really no major issues from it. Wore a turtle shell for a little bit, keep my back nice and straight. I get paralyzed because they hit my vertebrae. So I had an exclusion for a little bit and then it was removed. It could be something like that. It could be medically based, right? You have something in your medical records. Diabetes is a tough one. That's one of the reasons we'll have conversations with not as much in disability insurance, but kids with life insurance can also make life insurance very difficult for kids to get if they get childhood diabetes. Even your prescription, certain prescriptions could make it more difficult. They'll do a full script check. They'll check all your medical records. Sometimes it's not as much getting denied as it is just having some type of exclusion on there, or maybe them adding in some type of rating that makes your premium more expensive. But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Find yourself a good independent insurance broker. Again, use that list that we knitted on there with Michael, Larry, and Stephanie. Talk to them. Explain all your details. Remember, they're your advocate. Then if they have a question, they usually will go to their own underwriters. They'll kind of say like, hey, I have a Joe or Jane Smith. Here's what we got going. What do you think this would look like if we applied? They'll come back with that and then give you the notes on going forward. And every provider can look at certain things differently. Eons ago, when I was first learning all this stuff, even the way that some of the life insurance companies would look at smokeless tobacco, where some would consider smokeless and then some would consider cigars, it was amazing to me like how they all looked at tobacco differently. And tobacco really can affect rates, especially life insurance. But just goes to show you, having a good independent insurance broker who knows where all the strengths and weaknesses are of those 5 main providers, it's going to help you. Remember, they're your advocate. They'll help you. So 2 disabilities back to back. I'm going to come back now to the other one. I like this question. I love questions about this topic. Given the issues with some financial advisors in finding someone trustworthy, does the term fiduciary actually mean anything in practice? I'm going to say kind of. And here's why I say kind of. I'm a CFP, a certified financial professional. Very high standard. It doesn't mean that every CFP does it the right way. You can still find CFPs that have marks on their records. They're out there slinging products every day. It doesn't mean that they're perfect. Same thing with fiduciary. Now, fiduciary technically does add in an extra layer in there, but our industry still has a long way to go in terms of protecting the consumer. I think it's important to see that. You want to see that because it's that extra level of standard. But even the way that some of these other designations, licenses, they'll put in the term fiduciary, but even there, they still go sling some questionable products on you. Now, it gives you a little bit of better protection. So I think you'd rather see it than not see it. If you don't see it, you're probably decently concerned. But you probably also have some great financial advisors out there that don't use the term fiduciary and they do great work. So that's why it's really tough. I think the key here is whenever you're looking for an advisor, you want to interview, you want to ask proper questions. I always come back to the ones of, do you have any conflicts? That's a very important one. But 2, how are you paid? I want to know every form of income you have. Is it flat fees? We use a flat fee. Is that the only way you're getting paid? Are you getting paid because you sold me disability insurance? Are you getting paid because you sold me life insurance? Do you get paid because you use this investment company more than this investment company? That will give you a lot of context on the yellow flags versus red flags versus green flags. So the word is good. It doesn't mean that they're perfect. So still proceed with caution. I'd say it's a checkpoint. It's not an end game. But good question. Love that question. Last but not least, budgeting is the topic. If a spouse is spending what I would consider too much on extras we don't need, how do I help convince them to be more discretionary and save more? I feel like everyone watching this instantly thought of their spouse as the one that spends too much, even though it might be us. It's just kind of how you think, yeah, I've been there. I know I've had that conversation. But I love this question. Being on the same page is important. I probably have said this in a few videos before. I've married my high school sweetheart, so I never used any of the dating apps. But I've always said, why aren't they putting credit scores on dating apps? That's a really good way to know what you're getting into. So knowing where you're at, being on the same page with your significant other, spouse is really important. And if you're not seeing eye to eye, have a conversation. And sometimes you got to tie it to something else. If you're like, hey, babe, I can't go to Target so much because remember, we also wanted to take a vacation. So by going to Target daily, we likely can't take that trip that we wanted to take. Sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes it's got to be a little bit more tough love. You got to find your spouse, your significant other's love language. What's the best way to get through to them? But don't just sweep it under the rug, because I can tell you what's going to happen. You're going to continue to build up resent, anger, probably not going in the right spot in a financial perspective, and it likely leads to bigger issues maybe tied to that first question, the D word, right? I hope that's not the case, but this is why you need to have conversations. You got to be on the same page as your spouse. I don't have the perfect answer for you besides have the conversation, maybe link it to something larger. Walk through this. I wish I could have Mari come up the stairs right now and explain when we were in Philly and times were really tough because the business was just getting started. I used to take our budgeting software, show categories that were under and lower, and I taped it to the refrigerator at the end of the month. She hated it. I loved it. But not only for her, it also kept me in check. It reminded me like, okay, probably don't need to order everything off Amazon when it first comes to my head. Maybe we should just see, do we need it? Do we not need it? There are lots of ways to go about it. I don't have a perfect fix for it, but I do think having that conversation will go a long way and hopefully put you guys on a good path forward. Fun topics today, a little bit all over the place besides the 2 on disability, but I love this. This is one of my favorite things. Even when I do speaking engagements, I love the questions at the end. One, it keeps me on my toes, but it's truly questions that, someone had. They wanted to ask a financial advisor, CFP. So I love this. Please keep sending this my way. I always note you can drop it in the comments. Truthfully, most of these actually came through our Google form. So in the notes below, we have a link to a Google form, and that's where you can also add in questions. A little bit more personal if you don't want to have to drop them in the comments below, but also you can add more context too. So whatever works for you, send us your questions. If you want to see certain topics, investing or insurance or asset protection or budgeting, send those over to us. One, I can either make it an Ask Me Anything if it's something I can cover in a few sentences, or earlier in this session, you'll see it come out in this group of videos. Someone asked about Roth conversions versus backdoor Roths, and we really built that into one of our videos. So I love those topics, conversations. Send those over my way. If you've not subscribed, great time to subscribe to the channel. Click on the bell icon. You'll also get a notification every time I release a new video, which is weekly. We are sending content to you weekly now. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out with me for a bit. As always, I'll catch you on the next video.